Midnight, in a live congressional hearing, Jasmine Crockett shattered decades of silence in just 5 minutes, confronting Senator Tim Scott face to face over a truth the nation had long avoided: racially biased policing and the secret policies that protect violent officers. The entire room fell silent when she unveiled a classified document on camera. Tim Scott couldn't say a word. ***. 028, what followed forced America to look in the mirror, split the media, and shifted votes in Congress. Can one woman really change an entire system built to silence voices like hers? This is a story worth every second of your time, so stay with us. The double doors of room 2126 opened right on time at 8:30 a.m. sharp. ***. 053, this wasn't just another hearing. It felt heavier, like something that had been building for years. Reporters shuffled in quietly, scanning their notes. Staffers whispered as they took their seats. The marble walls felt colder than usual, and the seal of the United States Congress hung above the chairman's bench like a warning. ***. 115, this isn't politics as usual. This is Judgment Day. Cameras from every major network, CBS, ABC, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, flashed their red lights. Everyone was watching. The country wasn't just paying attention, it was holding its breath. Chairman Holt leaned into his mic. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the edge beneath it. ***. 143, this is the final hearing on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act before it goes to the full House. A quiet wave moved through the room. Even those who had heard it coming for weeks still felt the weight of it now. 3 years of debate, delays, and watered-down proposals had come to this moment. ***. 207, a vote was coming, and the decision would shape how America policed its own citizens for generations. Jasmine Crockett sat at one end of the table, composed but tense. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white. She didn't need to look around to feel the room watching her. They always watched her, but rarely listened. ***. 229, across from her was Senator Tim Scott, carefully adjusting the gold pin on his lapel. His expression was unreadable, but Jasmine could see it in his eyes. He came prepared to push back. They weren't just two lawmakers, they were two symbols, two sides of a fight that had split the country wide open. Jasmine wore a simple dark blazer, no jewelry except a small silver ring engraved with the initials J.A. for her cousin, Jamal Anderson, shot by police at a traffic stop. They said they thought he had a weapon. He was 17. She never forgot. She never forgave. ***. 323, Tim Scott looked polished in his navy suit, papers neatly stacked in front of him. He wasn't here to deny pain, but he believed change had to come slowly, carefully, without tearing down what he saw as the foundation of order. Jasmine didn't see order. She saw a system that chose silence over justice. ***. The chairman spoke again. Each of you will have 5 minutes for your opening statements. Jasmine inhaled once, slow and deep. 5 minutes. That's all she had. To speak for the names etched into protest signs. For the parents who never got answers. For the kids who learned early what it meant to be watched, feared, punished. She wasn't here to play safe. She was here because someone had to say what others wouldn't. ***. Tim Scott leaned forward slightly, pen in hand. He was ready for a debate. Jasmine wasn't. She was ready for a reckoning. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. But inside, Jasmine could feel the weight of the moment coiling tighter, like a spring wound to the edge. ***. For 41, the chairman had barely finished his sentence when Tim Scott leaned forward, pressed the button on his mic, and began to speak, not with anger, but with control. The kind of control honed through years in halls like this, the kind that sounded calm even when it was about to dismiss someone else's reality. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," he began. "Let me start by saying what many of us already know. The overwhelming majority of police officers in this country, 99%, wake up every day to serve and protect. They don't wake up looking to harm anyone." There it was, the number. 99%. Clean, reassuring, sanitized. Jasmine's jaw tensed, but she didn't interrupt. Not yet. Tim's voice was steady, measured, deliberate. "Do we have problems? Yes. Do we have work to do? Absolutely. But let's not throw gasoline on the fire by tearing down the very institutions that keep our neighborhoods safe. We don't need to defund the police. We need to fund better training, better tools, better oversight. He paused for effect, scanning the room. We don't fix the system by dismantling it. We fix it by investing in it. Because reform, real reform, means supporting those who put on the badge and take the risk every single day. Applause didn't break out, but a few nods moved down the Republican bench. To them, it sounded reasonable, rational, balanced. But to Jasmine, it sounded like denial wrapped in a velvet ribbon, because behind that 1% he mentioned so casually lay graves. Dozens of them, hundreds, thousands. Some never even got names, asterisk asterisk. 6:29, the room was still digesting his words when Jasmine shifted. It was subtle, just a lean, a breath, but it hit like a shift in air pressure before a storm. No one told her to speak. She didn't ask. She stood, not slowly, not theatrically. She rose the way someone does when they've waited too long to sit still. Her chair scraped back against the marble floor with a sharp, unfiltered sound that cut through the silence like a blade, asterisk asterisk. All eyes turned to her, not out of curiosity, but instinct. Something had changed. Something was about to be said that no one could ignore. She stepped forward, her voice low but clear enough to carve through stone. 1%, she repeated, not as a question, but as a warning. 1% of officers with the power to kill an innocent person without consequence means the other 99% lose all meaning. The words didn't echo. They landed heavy, hard, final. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that follows something undeniable. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words carried weight because they came from truth, not volume. She looked directly at Senator Scott, then scanned the dais. We are not talking about paperwork errors. We're talking about bodies. People. Children. Men with wallets mistaken for weapons. Women killed in their sleep. Mothers with empty arms and no closure. Her hands were still at her sides, but her entire body seemed to speak. If even 1% of airplanes crashed, we'd ground the fleet. If 1% of surgeons killed patients on the table, we'd shut down hospitals. But with policing, we argue over funding while families bury their sons. She paused. Not for drama, but for air. For restraint. For control. And then, quieter, so no, Senator, 99% is not good enough if 1% can murder without justice. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched, thick, tense, electric. Even the cameras seemed to lean in, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. But then Tim Scott reached for his stack of papers. He didn't raise his voice, either. He didn't need to. His power was in the numbers, in the illusion of neutrality. With all due respect, he began, pressing one finger to the top sheet, the data tells a fuller story. His voice was calm, professional, even empathetic. But behind the tone was something colder. Control. Not dominance, not rage, just control. It was the kind of voice people trusted on TV. The kind of voice that made uncomfortable truths sound negotiable. He sat upright, spine straight, shoulders set, and continued. According to a DOJ review of 2023 arrest records, use of force incidents have actually declined by 17% nationwide. Black Americans make up 13% of the population, but in most urban departments, force is applied at rates proportionate to the crime index. He paused there, not to breathe, but to let the numbers settle, as if they were enough, as if they explained everything. No one interrupted him. No one looked satisfied, either. The room had grown colder, somehow. Brighter, as if the facts themselves had drained the human weight out of the air, asterisk asterisk. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't look away, but something behind her eyes tightened, a flash of disbelief so sharp it could cut steel. Tim didn't flinch. He went on, flipping to the next page like a teacher reviewing a lesson. These are facts, not feelings. We have to be careful not to confuse injustice with anecdote. The words fell with soft edges but heavy intent. They were meant to sound wise, measured, mature. But to those who had lived on the wrong end of a badge, they sounded like sandpaper against the truth. Still, he kept going. In a 2024 study by the National Police Foundation, he continued, lifting the next document slightly for effect, 82% of surveyed officers reported receiving implicit bias training, and over 90% passed standardized accountability reviews. That's progress. Another pause. Another look across the room. His eyes met Jasmine's now, steady and unshaken. It may not be perfect, but we are not a nation of systemic racists. We are a nation working toward balance. He let that final sentence land slowly, like a closing door. He folded his hands and sat back, confident he had done what he came to do, calm the fire with charts. Replace grief with graphs, asterisk asterisk. For some in the room, it worked. For others, it only made the silence heavier, because numbers don't cry. Numbers don't bleed. Numbers don't knock on a mother's door at 2:30 a.m. to say her son won't be coming home, asterisk asterisk. 12:03, as Tim Scott's final words faded, we are a nation working toward balance. Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still for a beat longer than anyone expected. Long enough to let his message hang in the air. Long enough for people to think maybe she'd nod. Maybe she'd respond politely. Maybe she'd move on, asterisk asterisk. She didn't. Instead, she leaned forward, slow and deliberate, like someone who wasn't just responding to an argument but loading live ammunition. Her hands moved with a strange, eerie calm, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind but waited for just the right silence to fire it. And then, something no one expected, she smiled. Not wide, not kind. It was the smallest, tightest curve of her lips. A smile that didn't say thank you for your point, but rather you just walked into it, asterisk asterisk. Senator Scott, she said, her voice quiet, composed, almost gentle. You forgot one statistic. The one you didn't publish. Every head turned. Cameras locked in. Staffers froze mid-gesture. Even the chairman sat back in his seat with a barely concealed alertness, asterisk asterisk. Jasmine turned to her laptop, already connected to the main display. Her fingers moved with confidence. No hesitation, no theatrics, just purpose. She clicked once, then once more, and the large screen behind the dais came to life. A file opened. Black background, white text. Asterisk June 4, 2024. Columbia, South Carolina. Body cam footage. Internal review file, asterisk she tapped the space bar, asterisk asterisk. The room fell silent as the video began. First static, then a jump cut to raw body cam footage. The scene was disorienting. Loud voices, shaky movement, flashing lights from a gas station canopy overhead. A black man, mid-30s, hands raised, backing away slowly, confused but not aggressive. One officer shouted, "Get down." Another screamed, "Stop resisting," before the men had moved an inch, asterisk asterisk. Then came the takedown. Fast. Violent. 2 officers. One drove a knee into the man's back. The other pushed his face into the pavement. Then the knee shifted higher, onto his neck. 17 seconds passed. Then 20. Then 32. His breathing became erratic. His voice cracked, panicked, strained, calling for air. I can't, and then nothing. His body stopped moving. His eyes were open, but lifeless. And the footage kept going. The officer stood, walked away. No CPR. No panic. Just silence, asterisk asterisk. The room cracked. A sharp gasp rippled across the hearing chamber, first from a young aide seated near the back, then from a veteran representative who instinctively reached for his glasses like they could shield him from what he'd just seen. Several people physically recoiled. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," but the mic didn't pick it up. Reporters began typing so fast the sound of keys became its own rhythm. No one tried to interrupt. No one dared, asterisk asterisk. The screen went dark. Jasmine turned back toward the room, but her focus was laser-locked on one person, Tim Scott. Her voice was clear now, controlled, but beneath it was something harder, sharper, pain that had been ground into steel. That was Marcus Lane, she said calmly. 36 years old. Father of 2. Wrong place. No weapon. No charges. She let it sink in. A few people instinctively glanced down at their notes, as if afraid to meet her eyes. Others couldn't look away. And no statement from your office. Not even after we sent the footage directly to your staff. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every syllable hit like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Her hands were still, her posture steady, her presence unshakable. You want to talk data, she said, her voice narrowing like a scalpel. That was your district. That was your silence. And just like that, the entire dynamic shifted. The statistics were gone. The talking points were dust. Now there was only the truth, raw on tape and undeniable. The room was still spinning from the footage when Jasmine inhaled, slow, deliberate, like someone forcing herself to keep breathing in a space that had stolen air from her lungs more than once. The silence hadn't broken. The cameras were still blinking. Phones were still buzzing in coat pockets, asterisk asterisk. But Jasmine's voice returned, not louder, not faster, just heavier, weighted, controlled like the steady pull of gravity before something drops. And this time, she didn't point to the screen. She pointed to her own past, asterisk asterisk. 1659, you want to talk about patterns, she asked, her voice low but unmistakably sharp. She wasn't raising a question. She was drawing a line. Then let me give you one that doesn't come from a spreadsheet. Her eyes didn't scan the room. She focused straight ahead, as if the story was too real to risk diffusing it across too many faces. She pressed her fingertips against the table, grounding herself, steadying the memory before releasing it, asterisk asterisk. My uncle, his name was Terence Crockett, was walking home from his second shift at the mill when two officers pulled up and demanded to see his ID. Her voice didn't waver, but something behind it did, like a bruise being touched again for the first time in years. He asked one question. Just one. She raised her hand, palm out, slow and calm, like she was replaying it frame by frame. What did I do wrong? That's all he said. A beat passed. No one moved. No one could. Some looked down instinctively, sensing what was coming next but not knowing how to brace for it. And for that, she continued, they slammed his head into the hood of the cruiser. Broke 3 ribs. Ruptured a disc in his spine. The words didn't rise. They fell hard and cold and irrefutable. She didn't look for sympathy. She wasn't asking for it. She was documenting it. He never walked the same again. He still can't tie his own shoes. 1 or 2 staffers shifted uncomfortably. A representative on the far side of the room blinked slowly, lips slightly parted, suddenly unsure how anyone could pivot from this. Jasmine let the silence come again, but not for long. We filed a complaint, she said, now pulling a thick manila folder from her bag. It was frayed around the corners, stained near the edges, overstuffed and bent, like it had been carried too many times without ever being opened. Sent it to Internal Affairs. Sent it to the State Attorney General. She held it up not like evidence, but like a wound. 7 years. The words hung like a sentence. A life sentence. 7 years of silence. Of letters unanswered. Of evidence ignored. Of this case being passed around like a virus no one wanted to catch. Then, without drama, she dropped the file flat onto the table. The sound wasn't loud, but in the room's breathless stillness, it echoed, not just off the walls, but in people's throats. In their conscience, asterisk asterisk. That's the justice some of us are told to believe in, she said, voice now sharpened like a courtroom blade. That's the system some of you are here to protect. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words had already raised the stakes higher than anyone expected, and higher than anyone, especially Tim Scott, could safely walk back from, asterisk asterisk. The folder Jasmine dropped still sat on the table like a silent brick of truth, undeniable, unmoved, unforgotten. Around it, no one made a sound. Even the rustling of notes and the subtle hum of electronics seemed to vanish, asterisk asterisk. Across the table, Tim Scott sat still, his hands clasped tightly together, eyes fixed not on Jasmine, not on the cameras, but on something internal. His throat moved just slightly. He wasn't flipping pages anymore. He wasn't pointing at data. He wasn't defending a policy or quoting a report. For several long seconds, Tim Scott was just a son. A son remembering, asterisk asterisk. Then, finally, he raised his eyes. There was no smirk, no strategy, just stillness. He spoke slowly, without a script. "My mother," he began, "was robbed at knife point when I was 9 years old." The words dropped gently, but they didn't fall flat. They shifted the room in a different way, not with fire, but with something more unexpected. Vulnerability, asterisk asterisk. He looked at no one in particular, as if the story lived outside the walls of the hearing room, somewhere back in time, somewhere it never stopped playing. "It was just before Christmas," he continued, the corner of his mouth tightening with memory. "She was working the closing shift at the diner, walking to the bus stop, when a man grabbed her from behind and pressed a knife to her neck." No one moved. Jasmine didn't interrupt, not because she agreed, but because something deeper was happening. A wound was being shown, and wounds, especially the real ones, command a certain kind of silence. "She managed to scream," he said, eyes narrowing with the image, and a patrol car parked down the block heard her. They were there in less than 20 seconds. They tackled him. They got the knife away. She came home that night, shaking, crying, but alive. His voice didn't tremble, but it wasn't smooth, either. It was a voice that carried dust, time, reality. He let the silence return, not for dramatic effect, but because it was necessary. The weight of the memory demanded space. And when he finally spoke again, it was with a kind of plain-spoken truth that made even the cameras seem to back off. "And for me, the badge meant safety. It meant someone would come when you screamed. That was it. No argument. No denial. No eraser of Jasmine's pain. Just another truth laid bare." But that single sentence, asterisk, "it meant someone would come when you screamed," asterisk, sat in the air like a dividing line between Americas. One where protection arrived in 20 seconds, and another where 7 years of paperwork still hadn't brought a single response, asterisk asterisk. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't challenged her facts. But in those quiet, unwavering words, Tim Scott exposed the sharpest difference of all, not belief, not ideology, but experience. And that difference was enough to shake the room all over again, asterisk asterisk. 23:27, the room had barely begun to recover from the quiet war of memories between Jasmine and Tim when it happened. Sudden, sharp, and completely tone-deaf. A conservative congressman seated near the edge of the dais shifted in his chair and leaned forward toward his mic. His name wasn't important, but his smirk was. He adjusted his cuff as if preparing for a press conference, not a reckoning. He had been quiet through most of the hearing, arms folded, occasionally sighing, clearly irritated by the emotional weight in the room. But now he had decided it had gone too far. Or maybe, from where he sat, it had never meant anything at all, asterisk asterisk. And so, with the careless confidence of someone who'd never been followed by a patrol car without reason, he said it. "If you're not happy with the police," he said flatly, "you're free to move somewhere else." The words didn't just break the silence. They violated it. Like a car alarm going off in a church. The effect was instant. Several heads snapped toward him. A staffer near the media box instinctively let out a quiet "what" under a breath. One of the younger aides closed his laptop a little too hard, trying not to react visibly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, asterisk asterisk. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. The insult didn't surprise her. It never did. What made this moment different was that it was spoken into a microphone, on the record, under the seal of Congress, in a hearing meant to address the death of a man who couldn't breathe, asterisk asterisk. Her face didn't twist. She didn't raise her eyebrows. Her response was not theatrical. It was ancestral. A different kind of weight moved through her body, and with a sudden, thunderous bang, her palm slammed flat against the table. The sound echoed, short, sharp, final. A few papers jumped. A glass near the stenographer vibrated audibly. Even the cameras, those emotionless eyes blinking red, seemed to flinch, asterisk asterisk. She stood up so quickly the chair behind her slid an inch across the floor. She didn't lean toward the mic. She didn't need to. Her voice carried like something that had been waiting too long to speak. "I was born here," she said, each word as grounded as stone. "I'm not a guest." Her tone wasn't loud, but it was exact. It carried the weight of generations who had been told to go somewhere else after building the very nation they were being asked to leave. No one moved, not even the congressman who had spoken. He leaned back slightly now, blinking like he hadn't expected the table to hit back from across the horseshoe, ***. Tim Scott exhaled a long, visible breath, like someone watching a fire approach a line of gasoline. He didn't reach for his papers. He didn't check his phone. He just leaned forward and said quietly, without challenge, without bite, "Don't let emotion kill reason." It wasn't an attack. It was something else, fatigue, perhaps. A plea. An echo of the belief that if everyone stayed calm, maybe something could be salvaged, ***. But in that moment, it only made the divide sharper. Jasmine turned to him slowly. Her expression didn't harden. It deepened, like someone who had looked reason in the eye once and found nothing there. Her stare was still. Her voice, lower now, came out like a slow drumbeat pulled from the ground. "I saw blood before I ever saw reason." And with that, everything stopped. There were no gasps. No keyboard clacks. Only stillness, because everyone in the room, for one terrifying second, understood this wasn't just a policy debate. This was what it felt like when history stepped into the room and refused to sit down, ***. 27:48, the tension in the chamber had thickened to the point of suffocation. Jasmine's words, ***I saw blood before I ever saw reason***, were still vibrating in the bones of everyone present like the final chord of a requiem, one refusing to fade. The chairman hadn't banged his gavel. The cameras hadn't blinked away. And no one, not even the congressman who suggested she leave the country, had dared to speak again, ***. It was Jasmine who moved first. But she didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She opened a manila folder with the same calm as someone lighting a match in a room full of gas. "This hearing has heard statistics, personal stories, claims of bias, and claims of progress," she said, her voice steady, unshaken. "But there is one thing we haven't heard yet. Truth from the inside." She pulled out a thin document stamped restricted, the kind of stamp that screams louder than any headline. She held it in the air, not for effect, but for accountability. "This is a leaked internal memo from the FBI Civil Rights Division, dated February 2025. Her tone darkened by a degree sharp enough to quiet even the reporters now hovering at the edge of their seats. "It outlines that 27% of police departments surveyed admitted to having an informal, unwritten policy of not pursuing internal investigations into racial violence by officers, especially when victims are Black or Latino." Gasps erupted, some muffled, some sharp. The chairman leaned forward, as if uncertain whether to intervene or take notes. Staffers froze mid-gesture. Someone had dropped their pen. Jasmine placed the report on the witness table, then turned to the screen behind her. The red lights of the media cameras blinked in perfect rhythm, as if keeping time with the unraveling of a system no longer able to hide, ***. She clicked once. The screen behind her illuminated with the memo's header, "Confidential, FBI Field Report, Internal Compliance and Ethics Trends in Urban Police Agencies." Below that, paragraph after paragraph of sobering language appeared. Retaliation for reporting racial bias appears not only tolerated, but structurally enabled in nearly one-third of departments surveyed. Jasmine didn't need to explain it. The document spoke for itself. "We talk about bad apples," she said, now facing the room again. "But what do you call it when the orchard is designed to bury the roots?" Tim Scott leaned forward, his face unreadable, jaw clenched. For the first time, he looked like someone trying to choose his words as carefully as someone crossing a frozen lake. "That document," he said slowly, "is deeply concerning. But it represents behavior, individual behavior, not policy. Not intent. These are isolated cases, not systemic doctrine. We can't conflate isolated misconduct with the entire institution. That would be unjust to the many departments doing it right." His response sounded reasonable, at least on paper. It was calm, measured, like a lifeline tossed into a storm. But Jasmine didn't reach for it. She took a breath, not to calm down, but to steady the truth in her chest. "Isolated," she repeated softly. Then turned back to her laptop. Click. A new slide filled the screen. *5 states. 15 incidents. Identical outcomes, California, Texas, Georgia, Illinois, Pennsylvania. Each listed with the date of the complaint, the name of the victim, the department involved, and a chillingly identical final note, * no internal investigation pursued. Case closed with no officer reprimanded. Victim cited for noncompliance, * click. Now the screen showed faces. Photos of the victims. Some were mugshots. Others were social media pictures cropped from birthday cakes and graduations. Young men, older women. One boy who looked no older than 12. All black. All filed reports. None received justice, ***. Jasmine stepped aside, letting the screen speak in silence for a moment longer. I didn't make this list up, she said finally. These are from DOJ records and civil lawsuits that never made it past discovery because the officers in question were shielded by qualified immunity. Or worse, internal silence. She turned back to Scott, her eyes unwavering. Tell me, is it still isolated when 5 separate states, under 5 different governors, show the same pattern? Same phrasing. Same buried reports. Scott didn't speak immediately. He didn't have to. The room said it for him. The pattern wasn't hidden anymore. It was on display. It had names, dates, faces. Jasmine's voice dropped, not in volume, but in weight. This isn't about hating the police. This is about naming the silence. She tapped the report with a single finger. And silence, she said, is a structure. Reporters were no longer writing. They were filming live. Twitter feeds exploded outside the chamber. #structured silence began trending within 4 minutes. On the House feed, viewers flooded the comments with names. Say his name. Say her name, and one sentence began spreading like wildfire across news sites. We talk about bad apples, but what do you call it when the orchard is designed to bury the roots? Inside the room, the atmosphere was no longer just tense. It was transformed. No one was thinking about 5-minute speaking limits or polite yield of time exchanges. What Jasmine had laid bare wasn't just misconduct. It was method. Not just pain, but pattern. And in that moment, the hearing had crossed a line it couldn't walk back from, ***. 33:53, and yet, even as the hearing room stood tense and still, the real eruption wasn't happening inside those walls. It was happening outside them. Jasmine Crockett's final words had barely faded before the first clips began circulating. 30-second video snippets, cut from the live broadcast and uploaded to social media with captions that bled emotion. ***, I saw blood before I ever saw reason. I was born here. I'm not a guest. In less than 10 minutes, 2 hashtags began rising. First slowly, then like a tidal wave smashing every timeline, #LethiaSpeak and #BackTheBlue. By the top of the hour, both were trending nationally. By the end of the day, they were being spoken aloud in newsrooms, classrooms, coffee shops, and war rooms on both sides of the aisle, ***. #LethiaSpeak became a rallying cry for those demanding police reform, accountability, and space for voices like Jasmine's, black, female, unafraid. Her supporters flooded social platforms with videos of her testimony, excerpts of the FBI memo, and images of Marcus Lane and the folder she had dropped with surgical precision. It wasn't just politics now. It was personal, ***. But at the exact same time, #BackTheBlue was surging, too, fueled by conservative influencers, police unions, and law and order politicians warning against what they called emotional sabotage of institutional stability. They clipped Tim Scott's calm responses and pushed sound bites like, "Don't let emotion kill reason," as proof that restraint, not passion, was the adult in the room. For every clip of Jasmine slamming her hand on the table, there was a stitched video calling it radical theater. 2 realities. 2 truths. 1 boiling country, ***. Television didn't wait long to join the fight. That evening, CNN opened its primetime coverage with a chilling headline, ***, 27% of departments look the other way, Jasmine Crockett demands justice. Meanwhile, Fox News ran with, outburst on the Hill, Crockett versus reason, is Congress listening to chaos? On MSNBC, the leaked FBI memo was front and center, read aloud with grainy footage of the victims Jasmine named. On Newsmax, a guest host claimed the document was questionable at best, and that Crockett was dismantling public trust for retweets. No one aired the full hearing. Every outlet chose moments, the clips that made their case, confirmed their narrative, moved their base. And the base was moving fast. In Chicago, a spontaneous rally formed in front of a federal courthouse. Dozens holding signs with Jasmine's face and the words, *, not a guest. A citizen. * in Dallas, a crowd gathered near a local police department with banners reading, *, justice means action, not apologies. * at the same time, a counter-protest was forming in Raleigh, where a line of supporters wearing American flag gear waved thin blue line flags and chanted, *, protect those who protect us. The divide wasn't coming. It was already here. And Congress felt it like a noose tightening around the vote count. By morning, the inboxes of dozens of representatives, especially those from swing districts, were overflowing. Thousands of emails, voicemails, comments, demands, threats, pleas. Constituents who had never written a lawmaker before were now flooding their elected officials with messages that started with, "I saw the video," or *, after yesterday, I need to know where you stand. Chiefs of staff were pulling extra interns just to triage the onslaught. Behind closed doors, the conversation began to change. Some moderate Democrats who had quietly planned to abstain from the vote on the George Floyd Act were now reconsidering. I didn't expect this to explode like that. Republicans who had once dismissed the bill as symbolic suddenly faced a public relations nightmare. Town halls were being rescheduled. Fundraisers were being paused. The phones just wouldn't stop ringing, *. One staffer from a Midwestern Republican's office, speaking off record, admitted, *, we thought we could sit this one out. Now our own base is split. Half are shouting #back the blue, and the other half are asking why Tim Scott had no answer for that FBI memo. Internally, party strategists began circulating data showing that black voter turnout was climbing steadily online, even in red counties. Donors on both sides started calling, not to offer money, but to ask for answers, *. In real time, politicians began issuing new statements. Not apologies, repositionings. Language like, "We continue to evaluate the bill with great seriousness," replaced previous tweets calling it anti-police. One congressman who'd previously said, "We don't negotiate with activists," quietly deleted the tweet and by noon had posted, *, every voice deserves to be heard. I look forward to reviewing all aspects of the George Floyd Act with my colleagues. It wasn't a revolution. Not yet. But it was a signal. The hearing had changed something. Not just what people believed, but what they were willing to say aloud. And at the center of it all was a woman in a charcoal blazer, standing in a room where she had not just spoken, but shifted the room's gravity, *. Jasmine, for her part, said nothing to the press. She walked past reporters with the same posture she had in the chamber, steady, measured, unbothered by the storm because she had already walked through the fire. But across every news app in America, her image was there. The quote was there. The line was there, *, I was born here. I'm not a guest. * and just beneath it, in different fonts and colors depending on your screen, #Letherspeak #back the blue, two sides of the same country, watching the same moment and seeing something very different, *. 40:29, but just when it seemed the room had absorbed the worst of the storm, the door at the back of the chamber creaked open slowly, without announcement, without pretense. The timing was strange. The chairman glanced toward his aide, confused. There was no one else scheduled to speak. But the man who entered walked with purpose, not hesitation, *. He was middle-aged, broad-shouldered, but not threatening. His suit was modest. His eyes raked around the edges, scanned the room not with defiance, but with something closer to guilt. A whisper moved through the chamber like a current. One staffer leaned into another and mouthed, *, who is that? Jasmine's eyes narrowed. She'd never seen him before. Neither had Tim Scott, *. But the chairman, after glancing at a last-minute note placed in front of him, cleared his throat and said quietly, Mr. Derek Callahan, former officer of the Arlington Police Department, has requested to make a personal statement. He is the final witness for today. A few members shifted. The air changed again. Callahan stepped up to the microphone. He didn't have papers. No binder. Just shaking hands and a face that looked like it hadn't slept in weeks. He took a deep breath, let it out slow, and then began, not like someone delivering testimony, but like someone trying to drag a truth out of his own chest before it choked him. I was a cop for 18 years, he said. 2 different departments. No write-ups, no lawsuits. I got promoted. People trusted me. Silence. And I thought I was one of the good ones. His voice cracked slightly at that last word. I told myself that every day. Even when I looked away from things. Even when I laughed at the jokes other guys made in the locker room. Even when I let a black teenager cry in the backseat of my cruiser because I followed protocol. No one moved. I want to tell you something I was never supposed to say out loud, he continued, eyes locked straight ahead. I was trained. We were trained to see black men as threats. That's not in the handbook. That's not official. But it's real. I was told that if a black